So welcome to the webinar with Rapidi Online. Sorry for the delay. We had a technical issue broadcasting or starting the broadcast, but we are online now. With me, I have Sean Abadiv, who's head of our customer success. My name is Henning, and I'm integration advisor at Rapidi. Let me take you through what we're going to go through today. Please note that we have handout uploaded to the handout section, which you can download. If you have any questions, please use the question and answer section that we have. And when you have it, when we get the questions, we will answer them as quickly as we can or at the end of the session. The most common integrations that we do between Microsoft Dynamics and Salesforce, on the Salesforce side is the Service Cloud and the Sales Cloud, and the Microsoft Dynamics side, we support all versions. We have, as an example here today, the Microsoft Dynamics 365 Business Central, and we have the Finance and Operations. But we also support all versions back to the Microsoft Dynamics products that were launched from the late 80s and all the way up till today. And we are also committed to support any future versions of Microsoft Dynamics. Rapidi Online is a cloud data integration platform, which means that everything we do sits in the cloud. You don't have to install Rapidi Online of any of your servers. And when we do an integration, we have a direct transfer of data without any kind of staging, which means that we read and we write directly between the systems. And we don't have any of your data stored on any servers anywhere else than inside of your application, which is the most robust and secure way of doing integration. We support multiple endpoints, databases, and companies, which means that regardless how complex your integration is, we can support that with one and the same data integration tool, which makes it a lot easier for you. We also have a no programming approach, which means that we don't have to do any kind of programming to set up your integration inside of Rapidi Online. That eases a lot around the implementation. We don't have to do test of code. We don't have errors in the program itself. So you can really concentrate on doing the integration and make sure that we match the business processes that you want to have. We don't have any kind of programming inside of Microsoft Dynamics or Salesforce either. And on the Salesforce side, it's not a big deal, but on the Microsoft Dynamics side, especially if you're running some of the older versions, it's quite important from an upgrade perspective that we don't jeopardize your upgrade path. So with the Rapidi Online, you have a very light touch model where you can go ahead and upgrade without any real impact on the integration itself. As I also mentioned, we are supporting future versions as well. So once you are on Rapidi Online, we will make sure that the integration work with any of the versions that you might be using either now or in the future. We also support integrations between any versions of the applications you might have. So if you have more than one application, or more than one version, then we can also do integration between those in one and the same tool. We support any data that you have inside of Salesforce or Microsoft Dynamics, which means all the different tables, customers, prices, products, etc. If you have customizations, those are also supported. It's just as easy to integrate customized tables and fields as it is if it was a standard field. And if you add apps to Microsoft Dynamics or Salesforce, those would also be included in the integration if they sit inside of the database. The common scenarios are master data management, where you synchronize product prices and customers, etc. We have the intercompany transactions, where you can generate purchase orders from the sales orders. We have the business process automation, which is typically the quote to order from CRM to ERP, and general data synchronization to make better reporting between the different platforms, between different legal entities, and between different applications, even different versions of the applications. The common example that I wanted to talk about was in Salesforce, which is represented by the blue boxes. You can generate a lead. When it's marketing converted, they convert it in Salesforce. It's a standard feature into an account and contact and an opportunity carrying a quote. Then it's being processed by sales, and when the opportunity reach a certain stage, it could be closed won, Rapidi Online will pick it up and will create the customer inside of the ERP if the customer does not exist already. The same goes for the contact, and the opportunity would be converted to an order. It's very convenient for the salespeople to have an overview of the open orders on an account. So we synchronize back any changes to the open orders directly into the CRM system, which means that the sales rep don't have to switch systems in order to get an overview of the open orders. When an order is fully delivered, it can be invoiced, and the invoice from the ERP system gets transferred into the sales history in Salesforce. And when the sales invoice is paid, it will get transferred into the payment history. Those three objects are Rapidi App Extension objects. They come free out of the box with the Rapidi Online solution. They're unmanaged, so you can change them and you can say basically modify them any way you want to match your specific needs if you want to. But you can also just use it out of the box. In order to have, for instance, the quote to order integration, it's very common that you also need product and pricing information, which in this case also would be a part of the transfers that we set up during the configuration. And again, please feel free to ask any questions throughout the session. If you need so, just use the question section in the menu bar. The level that I just went through it is actually all you need in order to get a quote that includes everything you need. We only need to have the high-level integration requirements due to the simplicity of the Rapidi online platform. And there are a lot of good reasons why you should be integrating. One of them is collaboration. You have a chance to activate existing data, bringing in the ERP data into the CRM system. If you work with Einstein, you can use it in order to help making predictive recommendations, for instance, on the opportunity side. You get a good customer overview, bringing in the sales history, and actually you enable internal teams to collaborate much better because everybody can work with the same information in one system. Of course, there's a huge efficiency gain by eliminating double data entries and just by the fact that people don't have to switch between systems. The way that we normally set up integrations and what we recommend is try to get a system layout where people don't have to switch between one system to the other in order to complete the daily work processes. And in most cases, we can actually achieve the goal. So the salespeople or customer-facing people can work entirely inside of Salesforce and don't have to look up additional data in the ERP system. It has a very strong impact on the data quality. When you only have to create data once, you get much more consistent data and data that you can trust. You don't have to worry about whether this data has been updated in the other system. It gives much more consistent reports, and your report capabilities coming out of Salesforce is significantly increased when you can include ERP data in there as well. And from a user adoption perspective, of course, there's a great benefit as well, because when if you are new to Salesforce and you want your salespeople to work in there, if they can see that they already have their sales history in there, it just motivates them a lot more to actually use the system the way it should be used. And very often there's a growth element in the decision about an integration as well. It gives better decision support, it increases the customer satisfaction, and as a general CRM thing, you also sell more and you sell faster when you have the right information at hand. If we take a look at the Rapidi online platform itself, there are 8 components in there. We have the platform itself, which is where you create your account and where you maintain your integration. One of the sections in there is the data mapping, and that is basically where you decide which data you want to synchronize between the different systems. We have a scheduler where you can assign a transfer to that, and you can decide how frequent should this transfer run, and how do you want to deal with errors if there was a data error or connection error during your normal operation. We have a Rapidi connector, which is used to connect the ERP on-premise systems or hosted systems to the cloud. We have a log with notifications. We don't store any of your actual customer data or any of your other data, but we store information about the different transfers you make, how much you send forth and back, how long it took, and also if there are any errors in there. And you would get notified if that happened. We have a data toolbox, which is extremely powerful and very commonly used in the Salesforce to Dynamics integrations. For instance, to make data conversion from one data type to another. We have an API where we can develop new front-end tools to Repeaty Online, and we have support for many different endpoints, so you can extend your Salesforce to Dynamic integration with other endpoints, for instance, a Microsoft SQL database or another system of your interest. We have a lot of different features inside of Repeaty Online that makes data integration simple. For those of you who are using AX or 365 Finance and Operations or GP, we have a timestamp functionality that enables us just to synchronize new or modified data in Nav that comes out of the box with the standard system, but with the other products, it's not a standard feature that you can utilize. So we have built that technology on top. And in general, all the different components that we have here are made in order to make your data integration more robust and more simple. I will not go through it in details because Sean will cover that during the demo. And if you're not already sleeping now, there's a good chance that you will, unless we do a really good job. And Sean, I'm going to make you a presenter.
All right.
At least I will try.
And Richard, I saw your question, and we'll touch on that here in the next couple minutes. Make sure I'm showing the right screen here. Okay, let's see. So let me know when you can see my screen.
I can see it.
All right. So this is what the Repeaty platform looks like when you log in as a customer. And the first thing you see when you log in is you have a dashboard that gives you some general information about how the service is running on a platform. And if you're an administrator, you can do several things with this dashboard that you would need to do to work on any transfers, to modify anything, to just make sure the system's running the way you want it to run. And one thing that's very handy here is when we set up schedules for automated transfers, whenever we want to do anything, we can use this dashboard to pause everything for as long as we needed to pause it. We don't have to go into every one and stop it. So the first thing I'm going to touch on here is what Henning mentioned regarding our data endpoints. So we connect Repeaty to those different endpoints with this Connections tab. And I'm in a demo service that we're using for a Dynamics Nav demo. And you can see in this particular service, we only have 3 endpoints configured, but we can configure as many as needed. And what happens is when we configure something like Salesforce, it's pretty simple and straightforward to configure. And once we have a solid test down, we just click it, say, are we connected successfully? And once we're connected successfully, we can click this Read Design button. This Read Design button is very powerful. I'm not going to do it right now because it's going to take a few minutes. But what this does is it reads the metadata of the configured endpoint into the Repeaty.com platform. And then that makes all the details surrounding the metadata available for use when you're configuring an actual transfer. So it's very easy to handle any kind of customizations at all with this particular technology. And an example is there will be times during an implementation or during a project initiation during the development phase when a field needs to be added in Salesforce, for example, to bring some additional element over from Nav. It's very easy to go into Salesforce, add the field to the object, come back into Repeaty, and click this Read Design, and then that new field is available as soon as the redesign is finished within a couple minutes to be used in transfers. So it really eliminates this cycle of extended development periods while you're going through development and testing. You know, it's not going to take a week to be able to handle a new table on Nav side or a new web service field or a new object on the Salesforce side. It's very easy to bring all that metadata in and have it available during the transfers. And when we talk about the endpoint connections, in one of the slides that Henning showed. We do have different types of connectivity available. One is a straight SQL connection, and this is generally used when we extract data from the Dynamics ERP systems. Each ERP application has its own little idiosyncrasies associated with it, but in general, we use this SQL connection to bring data out of Nav and into Salesforce. On the web service side, especially for Dynamics Nav, this is how we write data into Nav. And we're able to connect to the Nav web services, and this allows us to use Repeaty to push data from Salesforce and have it hit the Nav application, and any kind of automated functionality that exists in Nav will be executed because we are using the web service just as if somebody is sitting down in front of the customer card entering the record. So any kind of custom functionality or processes or anything like that that are associated with that, say the addition of a new customer card, will get executed via Repeaty using this web service to write data. And some other ERP systems, like for example, Great Plains, we need to use a stored procedure. So it's the same facility where we set up the stored procedure as a data endpoint, and we connect to that stored procedure and pass the data into the stored procedure, and then Great Plains does its thing with the stored procedure, whatever it needs to do. And like Henning said, at any time, just stop with a question, and I see there's some hands up.
Yeah, there's a question, Sean. If the scheduler maintained context like the number of API calls per hour.
So the scheduler doesn't maintain that context about the number of API calls per hour, but we do things on the Repeaty side to limit the consumption of the Salesforce API calls, and I'll touch on those in a minute. Okay, so now once we have the connections established, then we can start configuring the transfers. Now I spent some time going over how we establish these data endpoints, because when we get into actually considering the configuration of transfers, the way that's done, in this particular one, since we had a question related to moving data out of Nav into Salesforce, I'm going to look at this demo transfer we have, which is to add Nav customers to Salesforce accounts. So the first thing I want to talk about is Henning touched on being able to use one Salesforce instance with multiple companies in your ERP system. One of the ways we handle that is we have a slick feature where we were able to assign tags to different companies, and then we're able to use those values in the space of a transfer. So we don't need to have a bunch of separate transfers handling different things. We can configure one transfer that's going to move the data the same way out of as many companies as you have into Salesforce, and likewise from Salesforce into as many companies as necessary. Each company will end up being a separate connection, only because Repeaty needs to know which database within ERP to write the data to. But you configure one transfer, and then you apply these tags depending on where you want the data to go inside Nav. If you're using one company, it's not really a problem. But when you see this notation of the percent with a tag value %, that's Repeaty's notation of saying, I'm going to substitute these values that I've already set up in my tags when this transfer runs. And in this particular case, when we're looking at this, we are moving data from our source, which is a Nav Sequal Connection, into Salesforce. So we have the source layout defined, the destination layout defined, the source table, and the customer table. Now, when we talk about source control, as I said, we want to make sure that we're limiting the number of API calls we're using when we hit Salesforce. So in this particular case, we are creating new accounts in Salesforce. And one of the ways we do that is we make sure we only bring the ones over that need to be created. At Repeaty, we're very conscious of making sure we're only moving the data that needs to be moving, because this increases the speed at which this happens. And it also, like I said, limits the number of times we're consuming API calls on the Salesforce side. One particular thing is this commit per value that is in the source control. This is similar to if you're using, if you use data loader or Jitterbit or something like that for data manipulation inside Salesforce. this is that chunking value. So Salesforce can handle up to 200 calls to records in one API call. So we can set this depending on the type of transfer. We can set it to 200. So things will be committed in batches of 200. It consumes one API call. An important thing here regarding the source control is the store new ID field, external ID. What this is telling this individual transfer is that when I commit a record successfully, I then want to take my new ID value, and that's defined in this table link. This is where we define the cross-reference of these records. And I want to write that directly into my source. So this one's coming, this transfer is saying take a customer from Nav and write it into Salesforce. When that record's committed successfully in Salesforce, it'll take the ID value, which is the Salesforce record ID, and write it back into this external ID field in the Nav customer table. So we don't have a two-step process to do this, and this also helps us with limiting the number of records where PD needs to look at in each transfer. In this case, this filter that's applied to this transfer says, I only want to look at records in Nav where the external ID field is null. In other words, they have not been populated yet. This external ID field has not been written by Repeaty because it hasn't been transferred. There are different ways we can use this source control, but the biggest impact that this source control has is because we are, when you're completely installed, we are operating in a cloud environment, even though most of the ERP systems, in this case, they are on-premise. But Repeaty is in the cloud, Salesforce is in the cloud. So there are times, if you're a Salesforce user, you've noticed that there will be a little bit of a break in connectivity with Salesforce. You'll lose connectivity for a few seconds, for 10 seconds, for however long it is. If that happens during a synchronization process, the process errors out because it can't write to Salesforce anymore. It can't connect to one of the pieces. With our source control mechanisms and our methodology that we use, this is really powerful in that if I have a transfer running, say I'm transferring 5,000 customers that need to go from one side to the other, and during the transfer, there's some break in the connectivity for a few seconds, and I was at customer 4,700, we can set up a retry mechanism in Repeaty so that when it retries, it can pick up from 4,701. It doesn't have to go through all of the other 4,700 customers because we already know that they've been successfully transferred. So this is really powerful in helping customers not only maintain their like judicious use of API calls, but also in the processing of the integration itself, that we don't have to go back and redo things that have already been done successfully. Repeaty knows what has happened, and it will just pick up from where it left off and start over again. Another key point related to that Henning made is that we don't do any kind of interim storage anywhere, so there's no staging tables that have to be cleaned up anywhere on either side. There's nothing in Repeaty that has to be cleaned up in the event of an error or anything like that. When we have the source control enabled the way any individual implementation needs it to be enabled, it runs very smoothly. And in the error handling and retry facility, we also make sure that we're not bombarding Repeaty administrators with useless emails about the system not being able to talk to Salesforce for 5 seconds or something like that. Okay. Now what I wanted to do is, like, if we look at this field list, now this is our actual how we're moving the data at the element level. So these are the attributes. In this case, this is the Nav fields from customer, and these are the Salesforce fields from the account object. And when we have the endpoints configured and the metadata read, it becomes very easy to access what the details are of each side. So when I look at this browse table layout, I click the button, this is showing me all the fields, all the metadata for this connection, the Nav Sequal 01 connection, and I'm looking at the customer table. Here's all the fields in the customer table. So these are all the things that I can use in this transfer. So if I wanted to pick one of these, I usually don't remember how anything's spelled, so I use this a lot, and I can start typing in here, and as you can see, as I do a type ahead, it's bringing me all the matches back. So it makes it very simple to build these individual attribute transfer, these field lists on each side. You can do them really quickly. And if you don't know what exactly you want to do, if it's a custom table or something like that, I'm going to delete this one right now. You can actually build a new field list straight from the source or the destination and then populate whatever either side that needs to be populated. We do that actually quite a bit. The other thing I want to mention here too is that, I was talking about the different types of connections. So this is our Nav Sequal connection. So this is showing me the customer database. I can look at item. Same functionality applies. As I start typing ahead, it's showing me everything that's matching what I'm typing. So these are the Nav fields. I go to item, I see all the item tables. But if I was working with the Nav web service, these are the published. If you're familiar with the way Nav works and you have a particular card in the user interface, you can make that available as a web service. And then the web service is available to Repeaty to use. So if I look at the customer card web service, here's all the fields that I have access to through that customer card web service. And Repeaty just treats it like another data endpoint. We just map the fields, and Repeaty will handle passing that data into the web service, and the web service will get triggered and executed in Nav when the record's written. Everybody with me? I just want to make sure that there's no questions or if I could expand on anything that we've talked about so far.
So far, you're good. Thank you.
All right. So once we have these individual transfers set up, you can see in this transfer list, we have a lot of demo type transfers. So some are going from Nav into Salesforce, some are going from Salesforce into Nav. I will assign these to a group, and then I'll create a schedule to run the group of transfers. And the schedule is a really powerful mechanism also. So I'm just going to look at this in this demo environment that we're looking at. We have a group of customer transfers. Here's all the customer transfers that execute in that group. And we actually have a very simple way. We name them in the order sort of alphabetically that we want them to run in. And then when I set up the schedule for this group, I'm able to go into the scheduler and define how often I want it to run. I can see what its status is, what I want to have happen on the error handling, and I can get some general statistics about the last date and time it was run and the next time it's supposed to be run. The very important thing here is this error interval and this notify interval. The error interval tells me that, in this case, this particular transfer is running once a day, and I should stop moving my mouse so much. The transfer runs once a day. The error interval parameter there of 1 hour is saying, like, okay, if this transfer runs into an error for some reason, it doesn't complete successfully, pick up and retry itself once every hour. And the notify interval is at 5 hours. And what that is saying in this particular configuration is that if I have an error and I want you to pick it up and retry it once every hour, don't notify someone until 5 hours. So that's how we get around the not notifying everybody, not sending out too many notifications in the event of a problem, but also not stopping the whole transfer process. If there's an error and it retries in an hour and it picks it up and completes successfully, it just moves on and will run the next day. If it continues to be an error after 5 hours, then it will send out a notification and tell somebody, hey, there's something wrong here that needs some attention. And then we can also get very granular in the schedule when we want the integrations to run. So that's why we have the days of the week checkboxes there. The date, the start and end time. So we use this if we have an interval that's running, say, hourly on a day, but we only want it to run from, 6 p.m. to 11 p.m. We put the start and end times there. The transfer won't start until 6 p.m. and it won't run after 11 p.m. So we try to limit the amount of activity on both systems that way, so that we're not just moving data. We're trying to move data that doesn't need to be moved, or that doesn't need to be moved when it needs to be moved. We also have the heading pointed out. We can see the history of what has been run. There's a full logging capability here also. And we also use a kind of sophisticated runtime information to help control our source data. And this is we'll see over here. So this tells me that this is a UTC time code essentially. But what this tells me is I can use this runtime information when I'm configuring these transfers. And I'm going to jump back over there for a minute. So I'm going to show you how this really is powerful. So when I look at the source control, this particular one is using this new account number, but if I wanted to do an update transfer, I can look in the source control, and this is coming from the customer field, the customer table in Nav into Salesforce. I can actually use the Microsoft SQL Server timestamp functionality in here. And this controls all my source records. So once this transfer runs once successfully, the RTI is written, the date and time it last ran successfully. And then the next time it runs, it uses that to compare to the timestamp value of the records. So anything that had been previously transferred successfully would have already been updated. And anything that hasn't, the timestamp is going to be less than the RTI, and Repeat is going to pick it up and say, I haven't processed this record yet. So we have multiple ways that we can use with our customers that are very flexible in terms of how the data is going to move and when it's going to move. And we also have a long list of advanced capabilities here where we can really control how data is moving at a really granular level. And we can do some things in terms of being able to create a one-to-many relationship in one transfer if we need to by using a scatter, this scatter functionality. So we won't have to have separate transfers, which would then say like, oh, have I transferred my parent yet? Do I need to transfer the children? It can all happen in one transfer. Same thing for gather. It's the opposite way where we're rolling things up. And we also can have sub-transfers. So if you think of, say, like invoice and invoice lines or something, all of that can move in one transfer. We don't have to have a separate function that does that, which would then require making sure that every row has to be checked to make sure that's aligned with the parent and everything else. This is very, very handy. And the last thing I want to talk about is we have link storages. In the event that we can't manage the cross-reference internally with Repeaty, we can create a link storage to store the cross-references if necessary. This particular service doesn't have any set up. But this will tell me, like, I can store the unique value from the ERP side and the Salesforce record ID, and we maintain that. It'll get written and updated automatically. And once it's there, it's available to be used in the transfers. I mentioned these tags. We can use these tags to really get we can use tags to specify not just what company we want to write and extract data from in Navision, but we can also set up specific ones that can then be used in the transfers also. So I can use, in this particular example, I can use this demo prefix tag. I can use that within the transfers using that % notation. So I don't have to worry about constantly maintaining a variable value somewhere. I just set it up once, and then it's available for use throughout the transfers. And that's available for use. You can access link storages that way if you want to do a lookup during the transfer to get a unique record ID or something like that. And one thing I skipped over, which I apologize, and I'm going to go back and look at this now. If I look at these transfers, and this particular one, I'm adding invoices from Navision into Salesforce Sales History. In this field list, you'll see some formulas and functions in here. So we like to adhere to the no-code approach, but we all know that at times in doing something like this, you're going to want to have some kind of transfer, some sort of transformation of this data happening. And the way the Repeaty technology works is we're able to build in these formulas at the attribute level to handle that transformation. And we have a full-featured set of functions along with all of our documentation of how to write the formulas. But essentially, if you can write a formula in Excel, you can construct a pretty powerful, full-featured transformation of data using our field list in here and putting the formulas on either side from the source. Not on either side, from the source. So we can do a lot of things, like we can not only transform data, but we can look up something in the source if we want to get a particular value that we want to write in as we're transferring. We can look up something in the destination if we want to get a particular value that we want to use to write in as a field value and during the transformation. And we use these formulas to do a lot of our filter controlling. It's a real powerful mechanism here to make sure we're just moving exactly what needs to be moved the right way. Okay, I think that's, I can't log into our Azure platform at the moment, so I can't show you what this is going to look like, but I will show you when we get the data into Salesforce. Here's a, I'm going to move this screen over. So here's our Salesforce demo. I'm in debug mode. Here's our Salesforce demo org. And I just landed on a particular account in here. And this happens to be a record from a Great Plains demo. And what I'm going to go to is, the screen doesn't seem to be reacting here. What's going on? Give me 1 second. This is not working. All right, just give me 1 second to open up this. So we've already moved this data. We were using it for a Great Plains demo previously. And I'm going to scroll past these things on the right at the moment. And this is what Henning was talking about with our pre-configured objects that are part of our unmanaged package. So we provide a sales order object, which is not the default Salesforce sales order, a sales history that holds all the records of the invoices, and there's also a ledger entry object also. So if I clicked on one of these, this is the actual data that was returned to Salesforce from Great Plains. So we bring back, out of the box, it's all of the fields from the ERP object, and customers use these as much or as little as they want. But as you can see, it's a typical Salesforce object where all the connections are made to parents and pick lists and lookup values and things like that. We can connect an order and an invoice up to an opportunity, so you'll be able to produce reports that show you, your whole entire history from when an opportunity closed, the orders that were created, things that were shipped against it, things that are back ordered, invoices that were posted against that opportunity, and as well as any ledger entries. And the ledger entries are going to show you payments, credit memos, essentially anything posted to the customer account. We have situations where customers use Salesforce and Navision or Great Plains, and there's a lot of operational financial things that happen in Great Plains that don't originate in Salesforce, but we're able to bring them back in so we can give Salesforce users a real complete picture of what's happening with the customer. And we're also, you can create, like I mentioned, reports, dashboards, very powerful to be able to produce a dashboard for sales managers as well as individual sales reps, or even in a customer service environment or field service environment, to be able to see how many outstanding invoices does a customer have, are they current, what's the balance on this customer account. And one thing, when I go back to look at the customer, this one is pretty simple, but up in here in the highlights panel, we're just showing what their balance is, what their total sales are so far, and what their total profit is so far. Since we're using a bunch of demo data, some of these numbers don't look right, but this is the kind of data that you can compile into a Salesforce page. It makes it really powerful for your users. I was working in one particular environment where sales reps didn't have this, and one of the reasons they really liked having Repeaty was they didn't have to make a call to finance every time when they're going to make a sales call to find out what's my current status with this customer. It really, back to one of Henning's slides, talking about the collaboration between departments. When everybody's looking at the same data, it becomes very easy to work together to provide that kind of customer service and to really elevate the customer relationship. One thing I wanted to mention is we are working on some Lightning-enabled components. So these are in development. You'll see these on the side over here, but they will eventually become part of our package too. So if you're using Lightning, you would have access to these components, and these are also going to come with some dashboards that will allow you to see like the status of the integration, as well as what's happening with the data in terms of a kind of a volume analysis, trend analysis, things like that. These components, once they're available, they are going to be available and to be used on a account page. You can use them on a contact page, a product page. You can see like what types of activities going on, which is important for salespeople at times to know, like, you know, what's their back order situation, what's the inventory situation, and what exactly is, you know, my current status of this customer. How do I need to treat them? And I think that's about it for at the moment. Henning, I'm going to turn it back over to you.
Okay, let me check if there are any questions. Not so far. Then I'm going to take it back. And so thank you very much, Sean. That was an excellent overview. So the pre-configured standard integration from Repeaty consists of 4 components. We have the integration platform itself with the data toolbox, the log, the Repeaty connector, the monitoring as Sean just showed. We have the integration templates, so the transfers, the schedules, the configuration that sits in there. They represent complete business processes and they're pre-configured based on our best practices, and you can modify them any way you want. You can use them as a standard solution, or you can customize them to your requirements. The Repeaty Online solution is documenting itself, so whenever you have done your configuration, you can actually print out directly a PDF document with your entire configuration for due diligence purposes or any similar. We have the sales history extension, which Sean just showed, which comes free out of charge, out of the box, as part of the Repeaty Online solution. And as we mentioned already, it's an unmanaged application. So again, you can use it as it is out of the box, or you can modify it to your requirements. We also have support included in our subscription. You can use it to do minor maintenance on your integration. For instance, adding a couple of new fields to an existing integration. That is included. If you need to do bigger chunks of work, like setting up a new integration between 2 tables, then it's something that would be quoted typically 3-4 hours to do that. So it doesn't take that long to do it. And of course, we can help with resolving if you have any data errors that you cannot decode exactly what the error message means. So all of this comes as part of the Repeaty Online solution. So it is pretty much an all-inclusive offering that we have. From an implementation perspective, how long does it take to implement? It depends a little bit, of course, on your specific scope. This estimation I have here is based on the flowchart I showed before with the quote to cash. So if you're on GP, Nav, or Business Central, it's typically around 4 to 8 days, depending on your complexity and your data quality. And if you are on AX or Dynamics 365 for finance and operations, then it's typically around 10 days it takes. The light estimation is typically if you only want a couple of the integrations as part of your scope. There are quite a lot of companies that are using the Repeaty Online solution. We have been in the market for more than 20 years. What is interesting for you is that they have all been through a process that we've talked about today. They've been through the same integration, and most of them are actually using an integration that is very similar. So the Rapidi Online is highly referenceable, and we're always happy to provide good references for your convenience. Rapidi is an old company. We are both Microsoft and Salesforce partner with a worldwide coverage. As Sean have shown today, we have a cutting-edge cloud technology that really simplifies the effort that is required to set up an integration. It's a no programming approach, which means that you don't have to change any kind of programming either in your Salesforce or in your Microsoft Dynamics platform, and not in Rapidi Online either. And if you go on AppExchange, you will see that we have an excellent customer rating in there as well. When customers are onboarding Rapidi Online and we ask them why, it's typically because of our insight and the you can say the specialization that we have within the Microsoft Dynamics and the Salesforce integration. When we ask customers why they stay, they add on top of that our outstanding support. And I think that from a general business perspective, we always try to be flexible to match whatever requirements you may have, either commercially or integration-wise. We have a lot more information available for you. You can either download it directly from our website. We also have uploaded some handouts to this session. But if you go to the website and you look under the resource section and you use the keywords, then you can find exactly what you need. And if you cannot find it, then just drop us an email and we will help you resolving whatever questions you might have. So just as a summary, Rapidi Online is a standard solution. It's super flexible and easy to implement. We have the templates that are making it ready to use, and we really have strived to make an effort in making data that are perfectly synchronized and giving you absolutely nothing to stress about. The solution is recommended by Salesforce for the Microsoft Dynamics integrations. Rapidi is a professional caring partner, and whenever we commit to something, we deliver to our promises with no bad surprises. So before ending this session today, I just want to ask if there are any questions. Now would be a good time to raise those. I'm just going to give you a minute, and if there are no questions, then we're going to end the session. But if you have any questions, please go ahead now and ask. Oh, there was a question. Let's share it. Oh, that was not a question. That was thanks for the presentation. Thank you very much yourself. Thank you very much for joining today. It has been a pleasure having you all on board. Thank you so much. I hope we can continue the discussions face to face. And again, I wish you a wonderful day, and sorry for the inconvenience in the beginning of the presentation. Thank you very much and have a great day. Bye-bye.